Okay, so thanks everyone for coming. Today we'll be doing a little fireside chat with Derek from Reverie. I'm Miles from Reverie. We're going to talk about a little bit about what Reverie does, their work in Cosmos, and in governance more generally. So I guess just to start off, could you introduce Reverie, talk a little bit about what we do?
Yeah, so great to be here, and thanks, Miles. The core idea behind Reverie is a governance activist, and I don't mean in a hostile or aggressive manner, more friendly and value creative, as well as active protocol delegate, validator, and we really think of ourselves as someone that works closely with token holders and protocols teams to improve the core protocol and product through whatever means. I think governance is a very interesting way to express your worldview with the end goal of, again, within the Cosmos context, increasing your product market fit, increasing your reach. So channeling governance in a productive way, I think, is really important. And within the context of Cosmos specifically, we spend a lot of time on osmosis, specifically focusing on the Osmosis Grants Program, and yeah.
Great. And just to double click on the activism piece, what is the general philosophy behind Reverie's governance and activist approach?
Yeah, I think the main thing is governance is a means to an end. There's a lot of drama, there's a lot of debate and activity happening on the forums and discords, but at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters, if you look back in a few years, is like, are people using the protocol? Is it sustainable without a huge amount of financial incentives? What kind of moats and advantages have you built up over time? And I think it's just really important to remember. I think there's a lot of momentum. There's a lot of frankly pressure from token holders. I think to implement proposals and governance initiatives that are, in my view, a bit more short term. These could be things like buy and burn models. It could be tokenomics upgrades like VE tokenomics. And I think it's really important to just maintain a longer term view and remember the North Star of all of this is creating something that people want to use organically. Because if you can do that, then all stakeholders benefit over a long enough time frame.
So Reverie's work really started in Ethereum DeFi, but what drew you to Cosmos? You know, what do you think is unique about Cosmos governance, and how would you compare it to your experience, working with Uniswap and Compound on the Ethereum side?
Yeah, I think with Ethereum, I mean, it really, on-chain governance in terms of DeFi apps really began in 2020 when the Compound token came out and they released Compound Governor Bravo. It was a very basic primitive of the ability to create proposals and vote on them and delegate. And I think that's proliferated throughout many other ecosystems now. On Ethereum, I would say governance is not super active. Like if you look at the forums on some of the largest DeFi protocols, like Lido is pretty active, MakerDAO is very active, but Uniswap and Compound, I would say less so. Cosmos, by comparison, I think there's a much larger set of motivated and active individuals. I think a big reason of that is one of the core tenets of self-sovereignty. Everyone wants to be an app chain. So I think there's a much bigger incentive to really be super active and follow what's going on. And also as well as the new class of stakeholders, validators, which I think introduces a whole other dynamic. But I think, yeah, like spending time in Cosmos is very interesting to us because the sheer number of motivated and and interested people with direct skin in the game is, I would say, higher than your average DeFi protocol built on Ethereum.
Totally agree. Just shifting a little bit to what we do with Osmosis specifically, with the Osmosis Grants Program, how do you view the role of grants programs in Cosmos, and how do you see these, these grants programs evolving over time?
Yeah, I think this is something I think we think about a lot. And I think of a grants program for a crypto protocol as a combination of a more traditional grants program plus an ecosystem fund, plus I think there's an element of venture capital in there where you're trying to focus on, with the venture approach, it's really about investing in early stage ideas and people with the intention of hoping that a few of them deliver 100x value and are game changers for the broader portfolio. I think capital allocation is a really important question for protocols. Like all treasury spend proposals fall under this category, grants programs fall under this category. And I think if you look back in a few years, we'll find that the top 5 to 10% of funding proposals or grants are the most impactful ones and more impactful than everything else combined. So I think the purpose of grants is really to find talented and motivated individuals, and I think really empower them to become long-term parts of the protocol, right? That's the whole point of having everything be open source and having communities that anyone can join, is that you can be located anywhere around the world. You can contribute part-time. You don't have to be a full-time employee or contractor to the core teams. So I think it's really just trying to find and isolate these people and give them as much autonomy and power as possible, both financially and with the ability to, and helping them build something that ships and is usable. I think it's also really healthy for the protocol long term to have many different sets of qualified contributors. I think the goal for any protocol team or foundation should be, I think, to get the core product to a point where it's mature enough, and then after that, when it's ossified a bit, they can comfortably step away or hand off the protocol to others without any hiccups. So I think it's still very early in that process for most projects. Ethereum has achieved this over many years. Vitalik is no longer, he's obviously still heavily involved, but I think there's many other organizations that have stepped up outside of just the EF and have taken over core development. So I think that's a good example for others to follow. I think we're starting to see that play out in Cosmos as well. As an ecosystem, we've evolved past Tendermint and just the ICF. There's a ton of other organizations that have stepped up to the plate, and I think for Osmosis, it's again really about finding people that can play these roles and step into it in a trustworthy manner. So
that's great. And yeah, working on the grants program for Osmosis has been so fun because it is like an L1 ecosystem fund combined with DeFi application grants program. So just maybe a little bit more specifically, what are some of the initiatives and teams that the OGP has funded that you're really excited about?
Yeah, I think as you said, it exists at a pretty unique intersection because Osmosis's core functionality and product is the DEX, and that's what people are using today. But longer term, there's a much, I would say, broader vision of going after more verticals, of being a protocol that others can build on top of and tap into in many different ways. So I think there's a pretty large range of possibilities. There's a list on the website of all the potential things that will fund, and for any of the viewers, I encourage you to check it out online. I think some of the ones that I think are high impact, and we've spent time in the last few months, I think the skip proposal that just went on the forums is a potentially very interesting one. They were on stage yesterday talking a bit about it with Sunny, and I think that's a great example of a high quality team that is our subject matter expertise in something, and are really like looking to collaborate with the protocol on something that creates value for really all stakeholders over a long enough time frame. I think another example is I think a key part of Osmosis is obviously the incentives and ensuring that new pools are adequately incentivized, the right assets are incentivized, and right now I think it's all done via on-chain governance, and it's a slow, lengthy process that happens over 7+ days, and I think you could look at the data and realize that a lot of it isn't necessarily as optimized as it could be. The protocol is potentially overpaying in certain things and underpaying in others. So we've been working on an initiative to basically streamline some of that and help make sure the protocol is able to spend it in a more efficient manner. So I think that's something that we'll be releasing more information on in the coming days. And then outside of that, I think it's on the website, but there's a whole host of other things like fiat on-ramps, people building new aggregators and front ends on top of Osmosis, other apps that are leveraging some of the other infrastructure. There's a whole host of validator tooling and analytics that I think are also useful. But yeah, I think over the next six months, we'll see many more protocols and grantees ship. And I think the ones that are able to do so and have something that people really use, I think like you want to give those people as much autonomy and initiative as possible, because they've proven that they're able to operate in a self-sufficient manner. So yeah.
So maybe just zooming out a little bit to Cosmos governance broadly, and some of the proposals that we found really interesting. Are there any in particular, over the past 6 months since we've kind of been in this broader Cosmos space that have caught your attention?
Yeah, I think anyone that follows Cosmos governance knows that there is no shortage of drama. I think some of the ones that have been the most interesting I think the most obvious one is just the role of the hub. So with things like Prop 69 and 72, I think there's been a lot of discussion around like what is the long-term positioning of the hub, what kind of funding it gives to consumer chains, and really just what the overall positioning of it within the ecosystem is. I think the Atom 2.0 paper and announcement provides some clarity into that, which is great. But I think, yeah, anyone that's followed that discussion over the last 6 to 12 months know that there was a lot of conflicting opinions and a lot of discussion to get somewhere productive. So I think it's great to see progress there. I think self-sovereignty, again, is a critical principle of any app chain. It's the whole point. And property rights is a big part of that. And that's also a big theme, I think, that's come up in many different chains as it pertains to airdrops and staking and incentives. If you look at Juno, I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was about 6 months ago, there was some controversy about an early Juno staker getting a huge disproportionate amount of airdrops, and there was like this Juno Prop 16, which basically pushed to seize some of those assets and return them to the protocol or burn them. And yeah, I think that brought up some really critical questions for every validator, every chain. I think Osmosis is probably has the most active set of governance participants and proposals. I think just the sheer quantity of them, I think, is impressive, ranging from things like regular incentive changes, adding new assets to the front end, sub-DAOs like the grants program, the OSL, and the OMM, and there was also the Osmosis bridging proposal where Axelar ended up being the canonical bridge provider, again, to make things smooth from a UI perspective. So I think some of those things Osmosis has done is setting precedent, I think, for other protocols to learn from. And yeah, I think we're still very early. There's a lot of proposals in the next 6 to 12 months that I think will be interesting. But yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of new themes and new categories of governance initiatives that frankly aren't really possible in other ecosystems. So
I think part of the reason the activity is so high is because of the validator, approach to governance, right? And so, having worked on the Ethereum side, there's a similar role for governance delegates that you see with Maker and Uniswap. How would you compare the two approaches, and what do you think is the pros and cons to each approach? What works, what doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about like what validators really are, they really are professional delegates and professional politicians. But like yes, the core service that they're providing is security and staking, but their incentives are fundamentally accruing more stake, getting higher up on the leaderboards, and being someone that their end customer aligns with, the average token holder. So I think there's a pretty big emphasis for many validators to position themselves well, be very open and transparent about their worldview and how they'll vote. So they really are, at the end of the day, professional politicians that differentiate through their stances on different issues. And I think it's both a good thing and a bad thing. I think it's good because it means that the average token holder has ultimate control and veto power at the end of the day. They can choose which validators they delegate to. They can share their opinions on how they're doing. Unfortunately, I think most token holders don't vote, so it just ends up being validators voting on behalf of their constituents. I know there's been some talk about potentially like how to make that a more healthy system, but I think the downside of this kind of a system is it forces validators again to like play up and really align closely to token holders, even if that's not necessarily something that's good for the long-term health of the protocol. I think, again, speaking generally, I think certain proposals in certain communities are dominated by more short-term token holders that, again, want things like token burns and more aggressive incentives and higher yields, which could be great in the short run, but in the long run don't really contribute meaningfully to developing a moat or going after the core KPIs. So yeah, I think there's a lot more passion because of the existence of validators, a lot more energy, but it's a good and a bad thing.
That's great. I'm not sure if we have time for one more question, but just for any founders that have not launched yet, is there any mistakes that you would, want to caution them to avoid based off of, different approaches that we've seen, in any ecosystem really, but maybe in Cosmos specifically?
Yeah, I said this earlier, but I think the main thing is governance is a means to an end. Governance is something that it should be strived to minimize. You don't want, decisions are not effective when thousands of people are contributing to something and you need to ship something really quickly and efficiently. So I think token holders and governance should have final veto power on a lot of things, but it's something that I think usually has more drama and attention and overhead than the output. So I think that's just something important to remember. Yeah.